Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. Fine. Seeing a good friend. Brandon, can you hear
Yes, I can. And you can hear me well, correct?
me? I can.
Perfect.
I'm doing this over my computer. Is the audio okay, or do we need to connect my phone?
You're breaking.
I'm glad it's working now. Sorry about that.
Awesome. So everyone, you all can hear me well, correct? My panelists?
Yes.
All righty, wonderful. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. So again, I do want to welcome all of those who are watching a part of this, our second session of the Church United in Christ webinar that we have this year. This session in particular is entitled How to Heal, Arts, Therapy, and Holistic Options. And so again, I do want to thank everyone for joining us. And actually, this is a very appropriate webinar today as we, across the country, it's known as World Mental Health Day. So it's very appropriate that we have this scheduled. I don't know if the team knew that or anything, but it is very appropriate. So I do want to go ahead and give the panelists an opportunity to go ahead and introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves and what kind of work they do, and then we'll sort of kind of dive in. And for those that are watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type those out, and we'll go ahead and try to get those to the panelists.
Thank you for having me. And it's good to meet you all. So I'm Dr. Amanda Kemp. I'm a racial justice and mindfulness mentor. And so what that means is that I put racial justice and mindfulness into the same lane. As a spoken word artist and playwright, I also try to get right to the heart of the matter of finding compassion and justice in the performances and in the poetry that I create. So, and I guess the last thing that I would say is I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I live in a pretty red county. And so this whole idea of how do we stay whole and grounded in the midst of so much national and, you know, for us, regional pressure is really timely. So I'm glad to be here with you all.
Thank you so much, Reverend Bethune.
Hi, I'm so glad to meet all of you. Thank you for participating in the panel. I am Gina Bethune, and I'm an ordained minister, a board-certified chaplain, and a clinical pastoral education supervisor in the practice of directing healthcare chaplaincy in a large healthcare system in Austin, Texas. I have used art a lot in terms of working with patients to find some sense of outward expression to be able to enhance their healing experience. And for the last 3 years, I've worked with poetic medicine with clinical pastoral education students, really going in and using expressive arts with patients. So I also just really agree and with Amanda and her comments about how I see healing as a part of my own life in such a conflicted days these times, and use poetry and other arts for my own sense of nourishing my own spirit. So glad to be a part of the conversation.
Wonderful, and we do thank both of you all for the work that you do as it relates to racial and social justice. So we'll actually start, I want to start with Reverend Bethune. Give us some background about just some, I guess, some day-to-day things that you notice as relates to this topic and, you know, just current work that you're working on as it relates to this topic.
Well, I'm working in healthcare right now. In fact, my office that I'm sitting in today happens to be in our behavioral health hospital. I've my own chaplaincy experience and work was with in psychiatric hospitals. I've worked in 4, and I used art in my own direct patient care because I see and then got interested in how can I use it as an educator with other people who are looking to be a part of healing ministry, whether it's through working in a church, chaplaincy, or lay ministry. And what I find is that less and less folks, particularly here in Austin, Texas, are a part of a traditional religious faith group. But everybody relates to the life of the Spirit, what gives them hope, what gives them purpose, meaning, what helps folks get up and move through some of the hard parts of their journey. And I found that art gives, it gives a language to express what's really deep in the soul in a way that really brings an opportunity to externalize experience and name it and move towards healing.
Okay, wonderful. And Dr. Kemp?
I want to share something. Here it is. So for me, art has been a lifesaver. You know, I wrote my first poem when I was 9. So for me, it's like, it's a way to externalize what can be overwhelming emotionally, and get it outside of you so you can look at it and, you know, play with it and create a different relationship to it. So instead of you just being overcome and surrounded and, you know, submerged by an emotional experience, a pain, you know, creating art gets it out of you, gets you to mess around with it, to reassume your power, your flexibility, your humor, your sass, all kinds of things can come through when you decide to take it outside of yourself and externalize it via art. So I'm holding up my book because in 2016, after the election of Donald Trump, I went to the recording studio and I made an audiobook version of this. And that was my way of coping with what had happened. There's an essay in here I wrote called Walking While Black. And it was just recording my thoughts and experiences as I walked in a predominantly white Connecticut neighborhood that was not my home. And all the automatic thoughts that came up that I wasn't even aware of until I was aware. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I'm thinking all these thoughts about, am I a threat? Do they think I'm a threat? Is somebody going to call the police on me? It's 8:25. People don't walk around here. They're all in cars, you know? And so I decided to just get that out there. And what I found is that putting it out there gives people who have similar experiences or who don't have your experience, but it gives you a way to bond, to create a connection. And that's the other important thing about art for me, is that it gives me a way to get outside of myself and reach out to somebody else, to know that I'm not alone. So the last thing I'll say, it has to do with feelings. So we live in a society where too often our feelings are, quote, non-professional or unprofessional, or sometimes, like, I mentor women who are really suppressed because they're afraid of being the angry Black woman stereotype, or the angry woman of color stereotype. So they feel hemmed in, and because they don't want to be that stereotype, but then they don't actually get to express what they're feeling. And I'm sure, as the chaplain will tell us, when that kind of stuff doesn't get expressed, it gets turned inward. And it starts to eat away at us, or it gets directed toward our kids or our spouses, or it comes out in inappropriate ways that we would not choose, but it just blew up. It just came up out of us. So I feel like art is a way to also discharge or honor our feelings, actually, to honor them without even having to worry about, well, am I going to harm someone? So those are my initial thoughts.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you both. So we've sort of kind of started talking about the artistic way. I want to shift a little bit because another portion of the dialogue deals with therapy. And so I want to sort of kind of get you all's ideas or take, a lot of people, especially, and I can point this out, especially in the African-American community, therapy is a stigma. I don't want to go to therapy, or I don't want to do these kinds of therapeutic things because, I then sense mentally that I have a problem or there's some kind of deficiency. So first off, as it relates to that stigma, what are some of your approaches to dealing with that? And then give us some healthy ways or some good therapeutic ideas to deal with when we're talking about racial and social justice. I spent, I don't know if you all remember, back in 2016, actually, we had what we called the Charlotte Uprising. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, after the murder of Keith Lamont Scott here. And so I spent maybe about 2 weeks with ministerial colleagues in the city. And so I did not realize until after all of that was done, all the marching and the protesting was done, the mental weight that was literally I still dealt with every day. So even going back to work, I work, working in corporate America, and now you have these stigmas, and so you're trying to figure out ways to deal and to cope in a therapeutic way. What are some of your options or ideas for those who are entrenched in this work consistently? So anyone can answer.
Well, I'll jump into that. You shared your own experience. I was actually involved, not by my own choosing, but by just involved by a police officer in what became a police officer shooting of an African-American man in our community. And it was an incredibly difficult experience for me, for the loss of a man named Larry Jackson, and also to be involved in it by the officer. And as I looked at what I needed in the months that followed, because I was also involved in multiple legal experiences out of that, but I know that I utilized therapy myself for that, but part of therapy for me was engaging art too. As really Dr. Kemp was talking about externalizing emotion. There's something about using journal prompts, about reading poetry, actually one of the things that came out of me through this was going to a therapeutic art class and began to draw an image, a sketch of an image that became a painting of this experience. It helped me heal. It helped me personally heal. And I certainly see that for many other people around me. And there's, there's a rawness about using art that gets you to the point. I use sixers and haiku with patients and students. That's a short form of poetry many of you are familiar with, but it helps you cut to the chase, get rid of the verbosity, and get down to how do you say that short? How do you use a word to really capture your emotional experience, your desperation, your joy? Right now in these days, I've been reading, and I read poetry sometimes I'll choose a poem and read it repetitively, like you might read scripture if you're from a faith tradition where scripture is important to you, you know, and in the Christian tradition it is sacred text. But poetry to me can be sacred text too. And I've been reading a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye called Kindness. Because in this day of talking about make America great again, I want to make America kind again. And this poem by Naomi, who's a Palestinian American, also some Latino background, but she really talks about, and can I read just a couple of verses from this poem? Would that be all right? Okay. She says, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you can know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you can ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is you I've been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. To me, this kind of understanding of kindness, this integration of sorrow, of the hard stuff of life, you know, can be healing as we turn towards it. We realize in our humanity what we've been through, how it's changed us and moved us, and how we can appreciate the gift of a good day, the smile of a stranger, the kindness that comes our way, that itself is, and as Frederick Buechner said, life it's all moments are key moments and life itself is grace. There's a depth I think that we can really engage with art to understand the human experience. And thanks for letting me share that point.
Yeah, that was
Definitely,
beautiful.
thank you. So when we, like I said, when we talk about these therapeutic options, what are some of the I know you know we're talking a lot about the art. Are there any other therapeutic options that you all would prescribe, or any ones that you use personally that would assist with those individuals who are, like I said, entrenched in this work, because this it's a very consistent work. So the mental aspect of it, and even the physical aspect of it, is serious. And like I said, with the mental aspect of it, I've seen individuals who, you know, they become so entrenched in the work that they almost become, you know, hypersensitive or very paranoid all the time. So what are ways to sort of kind of bring those factors down as we continue this work, because it is a long process, and as the title of the webinar series this year, the long haul, because it really is.
Right. Yeah, you know, it is a long haul. And so to me, what we need are practices of self-compassion and self-care. You talked about 2 weeks being in a very intense moment, and then, you know, you had to show back up at work in corporate America, you know. So what we need are practices that help us to digest our experiences and integrate them and let them go. So we can't live every moment like it is in fight or flight. You know, when you're in a battle, when you're in the moment, you are in a fight. If you're in a street, you know, if you're in a confrontation, you are in a high intense moment. And so your body's doing all kinds of things. It's secreting all kinds of hormones. Your heart rate is up. You know, maybe you can't even hear, you can't see. You know, you're just focused on that moment and survival. And that is appropriate. But what happens when you can't get your nervous system outside of that kind of wound up state? When you can't bring it back down, or you can't bring it back down without alcohol or drugs or something else like that, you know, then you need some other tools. And for me, that's why I call myself a mindfulness mentor. Not that I have it all together, but that there are other tools of self-compassion and of I'm just going to call it mindfulness that help you to bring yourself out of that heightened, intense battle state back into a rest state. If you cannot rest, if you cannot get yourself into a place of reception, but you're always like this on the aggression mode, you're going to burn yourself out. Like literally, you will burn out your adrenal glands. And the problem with when we're all in battle mode too long is that we get alienated from people around us. You know, if we're going to 5 meetings a week, we're upset at other people who maybe, you know, go once a month or twice. You know what I'm saying? We're like, they're not down for the struggle. And so we get to be part of like a very small hardcore. And the way we're going to make change in this country or in your community is not through a small group of super right people, meaning super correct people, super militant people. We actually need community to make change, the kind of change I think that we want. So we have to be able to move from the battle mode to the rest mode, from aggression to peace and love. Honestly, I'm 52, and this is what I know. You can't stay like this all the time, and you cannot build a movement in full battle mode all the time. You have to be able to practice love of yourself and love of the people who you say you want to serve. So I hope I answered your question. So to me, you could do that in a therapy environment with someone who's a licensed therapist, or you could do that by taking a class in mindfulness or self-compassion. You know, I'm a little embarrassed to say that I came to the party late. You know, I took my first self-compassion class, I think, when I was like 48, when I was really just at the end of my rope. And then finally I realized, oh, I got to turn some of this attention and intention over here, because it actually makes me a better mother and partner and organizer and artist when I've given myself, you know, when I've watered my soil. And I don't think we learn, really, I don't think we learn that it's honorable to water our soil, to tend to, you know, our ground. So that's my experience.
Reverend Bethany, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just think it's a journey to kind of figure out for yourself what does help you restore your soul. You know, each person is different. And I know there are lots of different approaches that can be helpful for me that might not be helpful for someone else. Meditation, to do guided imagery, to do helping. I know a lot of the patients, the behavioral health patients I've worked with, have to do some cognitive kind of restructuring of story to have a hopeful future instead of a future of dread. And that's some cognitive work. And that's where, again, linking it back to art, I think art can help with some of that by externalizing thoughts and looking at it and challenging yourself. Again, you get that externalized a little bit and you can look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, that's some pretty stinking thinking right there as I write that down. And I'm going to challenge myself about that. That might be a myth. I'm going to check that out. Or I know that's not true. I know I'm feeling that way now. What do I need to do to elevate my feelings, to feel a little more hopeful? Is that run? Is that listen to music? Is it journaling? Is it reading scripture? Is it meditating? Is it going to a park and just looking at people? You know, Maya Angelou used to talk about how we all need to just meander. She'd have a day away where she'd meander in and out of places without an agenda. What is it for, you know, for me? What is it for you? How do we have a toolbox of things that we know about ourselves, that we know to be true, to be helpful? And that's a part of self-discovery. And I think those of us who want to be a part of helping create a healing environment for folks really need to encourage finding that for each person instead of imposing what's good for us on someone else, or this is the way you should do this, because it really is a self-discovery.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, I would really agree with that. The idea of it being self-discovery, like I said, for a while, it took me, you know, a minute. And while I am, you know, Christian, a lot of friends be like, oh, just pray about it. And, you know, prayer helps, but there are some other, you know, like you said, holistic methods. And it was definitely things that I needed to do and figure out for myself. And so for me, I finally found out, you know, just really secluding myself off and really taking time to just, you know, decompress everything and mentally process a lot of the things that are happening, and then figure out, where do I go next from here? And I think one of the biggest issues that we deal with as it relates to the mental health aspect is that we're so, as Dr. Kemp said, we're so entrenched in the right now. We really have to decide, okay, so what happens next? I can't be so, you know, up in the air about where I'm at now that I forget that there's a process that I have to continue, because this is a long haul. And if I put all of my energy and divert all of my strength into just this one moment, you know, now I'm burnt out. Now I'm feeling, you know, I not only burnt out, but then I feel as if there's nothing else for this, or I then get tired of what's happening. And so now it's like I'm cutting myself off. I no longer want to deal with it. So that is a very healthy aspect to really think about, because I know a lot of people, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, especially when you're new to it. And I think, so, you know, in tying into what I just said, that whole newness, what advice would you give to those who are new to this? Because again, for some of us who have been doing this for a few years, you know, you started to develop that aspect of what you need to do after, you know, a big uphill battle. But what do you do? What would be the best options for those who are new to this, who've never, you know, experienced it, and, you know, say something hits their city? And like I said, 2 years ago, it really got new for me. I sat around the table with people, you know, talking about it, singing the Kumbaya songs for racial and social justice, until it hit in my city. Until now, it's like, okay, I have to put everything that I put on table now into action. So what are some ideas or some helpful tips that you can give to those who, like I said, who are new to this, who've never experienced this before?
Who have never experienced being active in a community.
Right. So active in the field of racial and social justice. So like I said, they you know, they're a part of it, but the realness of it, you know, actually hitting, being in your environment. What would you suggest for those individuals?
Get connected. Get connected. So something hits your city and your community, or you want to be part of a positive movement towards shifting something. Like in our town, we had a situation with the police where they used a taser on someone who was cooperating. And it turned out that according to procedure, the officer did go according to procedure, but the procedure was wrong. It was a bad procedure because it allowed this to happen. So what I suggest to people is to get connected. So when you go to a meeting, for example, or there's a forum, about whatever the issue is, make sure that you talk to somebody else there, that you actually say, okay, I'm new here. I'm new to this. Can you help me understand what's been going on? I'm Amanda. Who are you? I think it's really hard when you go to these things and then you walk away by yourself, because it's sort of like you're overwhelmed, or you don't know like where the progress has been made or that kind of stuff. The other thing I would say is, and this is whether you're long-term in it or you're just coming into it, I think it's important to know what it is that you're for. What is it that you're for? If people are all having a conversation about what they're against, what they're protesting, that is important. But then I want to encourage you to be a voice saying, okay, we don't want this, but can somebody please tell me what it is that we're for? What are we suggesting? Because there's a different vibration to building something or calling people to a vision of creation than a vision of, tearing down. And some structures need to be dismantled. But I think the space where I wanna be, and I think the space that's long-term, going to pull people in to make it bigger than just a small group, is the space of creation. What are you for? And then I guess the last thing, so I said, connect with somebody, make sure you get to know people, get clear about what you're for, or ask the questions to help the group get clear about what you're for. And I guess the third thing is, mindfulness mentor too, I would say, get with yourself. Like, you do a lot of outward stuff, come back in like you did, Brandon. Make sure you take some space to journal about it or to reflect on what's happening, what you're feeling, really, really, really what you're feeling, not just what you thought about what happened. Because when we don't take care of our feelings, bad things happen. Physical things happen, but also emotional things happen, negative impacts when you don't tend to your feelings. So that's what I would suggest.
I guess a couple of things I've been thinking about, just adding into the conversation that we've been having is how, sometimes as people of faith, we give really trite answers like pray about it or just, be positive. And there's a way sometimes that we do damage to people with that. I know one of my the first psychiatric hospital I worked in, a state hospital, and I used to go out to a mental health clinic in a neighboring community, and I was just, new in the field, and I was so shocked how many folks had gone to one church after another, really looking for community, and what they heard instead was, well, if you just pray harder, as if you could transcend this mental health issue by just being a person of greater faith. And it did a lot of damage because it caused either folks to try to fit in and detach from the real life experience of their narrative just to try to find community, or it caused them to just really feel negatively about that particular faith tradition and reject it, and maybe even reject their own sense of spirituality in a way that to nurture that part of themselves. So I think looking at ways, if you're new to this work and you're a person, and since this webinar is really being sponsored by a faith organization, I would say be careful about the kinds of advice you give, the kinds of, try it on, hearing it from the point of pain that the person's in. Try it on. Because sometimes we give some pretty bad advice as people who love God, and I don't think the kind of advice God would give. So just really trying to try that on. And I think the other thing that's just coming to my mind is about community, is make sure that the community is authentic community, that it's a community you can feel a sense of connection to be your real true self. I know this morning I was in a conversation with somebody who's really still just reeling from the whole last couple weeks and what happened with the Supreme court decision for Kavanaugh, and was just in a really negative place. And this is back to what you were saying, Brandon, about understanding we're people who are temporal. We have a past, we have a present, and we have a future, and those all affect one another. You know, and we need to think about that. I was so glad she could talk about her present pain in an authentic way, because as she talks about that, if she doesn't talk about that, that affects her future, you know, her understanding of self. And to be able to do it in a place where she felt safe, I thought was important. And knowing she won't always feel the intensity that she's feeling this morning, but it needs to be authentically expressed in loving community. So finding not just community, but authentic community.
Thank you all. So I do want to, you know, in a way, ask this question: What are some methods of art for those who are in the faith-based community? What are some methods of art to try in the church or in a faith-based context? So, like congregation art. What are some methods or some forms of art that you would suggest? Sort of kind of a question I had from someone, so I'm trying to see if I worded it the right way.
Well, I'm sorry. I'll go ahead. A very simple way to get started is you might ask people, if you're having a group and you want to learn about one another and about what mediums of art are important, you might just ask people to bring 3 pieces of art, whether it's a song they like, a poem they like, an image that they like, and talk about it and why, for whatever reason, they gravitate towards that particular piece of art. And then you can kind of learn about each other that way and learn, and believe me, people can do this, and we'll do it. People will bring a song they like, they'll bring a photograph they'll like, they'll bring a reading, and then you can see, if you're interested in trying to do a group, you can kind of see, is there one medium that kind of stands out? Maybe it's music we're going to use and talk about, or maybe it's poetry. You can kind of see where is the energy in the group. Writing prompts are great because it allows so much freedom, and I work with writing prompts a lot, and I will bring in a poem and look for a prompt in it. Mary Oliver's poem, My Work is Loving the World, The Messenger. You know, what my work is could be a writing prompt. My work is, and you will get such diversity in responses to that. Just encourage people to keep the pen moving. You know, don't stop and think about it too hard. Just keep writing for 3 minutes. What shows up on the paper? And there's a real power then in inviting people to read, not forcing people, but is there a part of that or all of that you'd like to read to the group? Because that's a different kind of externalizing it in public, in a group that holds it. So those are just 2 real simple ideas about getting started with it. And I think one of the things, unlike Dr. Kemp, I'm not a poet. I'm not a published poet. I'm not even, I've tried different art, but I would not consider myself an artist. But I can do this work. I can engage in it with people. Don't be afraid of it. that you're an expert, because you can. Talk about what enlivens your spirit and just encourage others to do the same.
Yeah. I was just going to say something very similar. I worked with a gospel choir at a high school. And, you know, I just took students who were interested in working with me, and I gave them writing prompts that were they had been studying spirituals. Well, they've been singing spirituals, and then I came in to give them some context for spirituals. That's my dog in the background. So anyway, but what we did was very similar to what the chaplain had suggested. I gave them a couple of prompts, and which they loved. I told them you have to write for 7 minutes, and even if and there's no thinking, just free write. Just write for 7 minutes. There's a timer, and if you run out of things to say, you can write, I've run out of things to say. I really have to go to the bathroom now. But you just keep your pen moving across the page, and you'll find more things to say. So we did one of our prompts, for example, was I declare myself free. And then, because we were talking about the 14th Amendment. And so then, you know, it was all kinds of stuff that they came up with. And the important thing about the writing is not that it be great art, but that it be, that it just come from them, and that it be held in a way, a non-judgmental way. So we use those writings to do a process I'll call a group poem process. And then those young people actually perform the 2 poems that they came up with. I put something in the chat. I don't know if it will be available to folks, but of a collaboration that my husband and I did with some young people. So yes, writing is very easy. No new materials needed. The second thing I'll say, though, because I'm looking at the chaplain's beautiful artwork on her walls, is, you know, you can just bring in some paper and markers and glitter and, again, a theme, and say, you know, we're not going to talk about it, or you can say we will talk about it, talk for a bit, and then have people create art. The big thing is that I think we want to encourage people that whatever they have is good. So it doesn't have to be like what someone else beside them is creating. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to let the dog out.
A great thing you can do too is just laminate different images, pieces of art, photographs, sunset, sunrise, paintings, but have a group of laminated photos. And, you know, sometimes I just put them on the floor and say, hey, pick up something you gravitate to for whatever reason right now, and hold it and think about it, and then share. You know, why did they pick up that particular piece of art? You know, what's speaking to their story with that image right now? And, you know, we were talking about self-care and respect and honoring yourself. Part of what we do when we work with art in a group is we teach folks how to hold a safe space and honor the expression of others. And to me, that is also a teaching tool that can translate into respecting your own feelings, your own self, whatever comes out of you. So like, for instance, with creative writing, or which is, you know, usually prose, most of us can't just sit down and write out a poem so much, but not to be concerned on form, although form can be real interesting, but just if we write, then there's a way that we teach response of like simple things like mirroring back a word or two that you heard, and then maybe moving towards thinking about how does that make you feel? What is the feeling you identify? I always like to go to the cognition last. You know, okay, now what are some thoughts, or what else comes to mind? Insights, surprises, because it teaches people just to kind of, as you go in that order, it teaches people to notice the words, and then notice the affective stuff that comes up And many times we have multiple affective things that come up when we hear somebody else's work, and then go to thoughts last, because sometimes we get too comfortable in the thoughts first and don't really get to the feelings. So those are simple, kind of some simple ways.
Awesome. Now, I do want to, this is, I guess, sort of kind of more my question, because I'm a musically inclined individual, but what are some kind of ways that you would say, as it relates to music, what are some holistic and healthy, musical options that you would suggest?
So I collaborate. My husband is a violinist, so I collaborate with him, and then another friend of mine is a saxophonist and a composer. So what I say, so what I say is this. One is that it can be great and amazing to collaborate if you're a musician, to play with someone who works with language or someone who works with like images, and give yourself permission to improvise, to try to find the song or the sound that comes from that feeling. My husband is European American, and what he put a soundtrack underneath Walking While Black that amplifies it, that really helps to communicate the message. So I think that so there's something amazing and powerful about music. And what I would say is just give yourself permission to improvise, to explore, not necessarily to, that it has to be right the first time, or that it has to fit a mode, And then I guess the other thing I would say is listen to music by people who are improvising, who are going off the track, and who, I guess the chaplain said it earlier, that speaks to you, that feeds you.
When you're using the word improvisation, I think of jazz. I love jazz and the improvisation that is a part of the music, because they know when to back up and give somebody else the spotlight. Every time they play, it's a new creation, a new energy, and there's a lot we can learn through music just about how to honor one another, how to be in the spotlight, how to pull back, how to integrate with others. But one of the things that I know to be true is music touches a place that is, I used to work with folks who were in a geriatric unit in a state hospital. Music can touch in a way, it's like the last thing that goes. You can go and sing a song somebody knows, and they go to a place you can't get to with any other language. And you can just see the tears in the eyes and the sense of belonging and connection. So really about music, what I do is look again, what do they like? So I teach my students, when you're in a hospital, it's a pretty intimidating environment, and people sometimes forget they even have access to their own stuff. They don't want to bother people and turn their phone on in their music or in a room, or they might even sit in a room with fluorescent lights over them and not even think to ask, hey, would somebody turn those lights out? So my students, at first I thought, well, we'll collect all this great music and they can take it in. And then my students were like, hey, we all have Spotify on our phones. We'll just use our phones. We'll just walk in and ask, what kind of music do you like? And I could give you many examples, but I'll give you one. There was a young man and a young adult, young man, like 19 years old, in our trauma hospital, our level 1 trauma hospital. He had been in a serious accident, and without getting into all those details, he was not communicating at all with anybody. He was not talking to the nurses, to the physician. One of my CP students went in and just said, hey, I'm wondering what kind of music you like. And he named the artist. My student pulled up Spotify, played some music, and he started talking. It was like it reached something inside him, this I'm not just this guy who's got this injury. I'm a guy who loves this music. And he started opening up. It changed his whole experience. It was a way he felt a sense of being accompanied with himself, the wholeness of who he was. And this music really reached him in a deep place.
Awesome. That's a very helpful and a very beautiful testament there. So we are just a little under the 2 o'clock hour. So I do want to see if there are any last words, any current projects you all are working on, and just any last words you all would like to give before we disembark on this afternoon.
Well, I want to thank you, Brandon, for moderating our conversation today. How's that volume? Is that a little better now?
Yeah, it's, well, I've sort of kind of just turned up my speaker so I could hear you, but I'm not sure if anyone, no one else reported that they had problems, so it's probably just me.
Oh,
I work in IT every day, and some days IT gets the best of me, so it could just be me.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know, a friend of mine texted me, so I'm going to share this with you, just this last couple, these opening lines of this poem. I was looking for an answer to a play, and I prayed on how to make this play that was missing a heart. And this is what came to me. I prayed, so I guess I'm offering this as a method too. If you pray for something and then just let your hand move across the page. So what came was, you know, the ancestors are calling you. You know, the ancestors are calling you. They say, remember me. They say, forgive me. They say, I forgive you. So I just want to leave you all with that.
Reverend Bethune?
Well, I think it's really a matter of knowing yourself a little better, looking for what inspires you around you, and try to integrate that in your life for healing and wholeness, and try to encourage the same with other people. Again, not imposing what helps us, but looking for people to connect story with something that helps them have a deeper sense of knowing who they are and a more hopeful future. And I think that can be a lot of different things. And so to self-discovery, you know, and encouraging that in each other, and to, if there's ever a time we needed to be inspired, you know, I think it's today. We need to be inspired. And there's a reason that the sale of poetry is skyrocketing. You know, we need a sense of inspiration. Maybe poetry's not for you, maybe it's music or some other medium, but look for what inspires you to be a more loving person and to be invested in trying to create with others a more hopeful future. And thanks so much for the opportunity to have the conversation with you, Brandon, with you, Amanda. Appreciated the time.
And I do want to thank you all from the team, the Racial Injustice Task Force of the Churches United in Christ, for taking your time to help us with these issues as we're navigating the realm of social justice. So I do want to thank you all both for your time and the wealth of knowledge that you both bring to this issue. So at this moment, this does conclude this portion of the webinar. I do want to remind everyone that our last webinar will be on the 24th, which is Wednesday, so not next Wednesday, but it's going to be the prior Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, where they're going to be talking about poverty, race, and mental health. So I do hope that you all, for those that are listening, and even our panelists, if you all have a moment to join in with us as we conclude this year's webinar series. And you will be able to find the webinars. If you all want to share this is to our attendees and to the panelists. If you want to share this webinar, if you want to use it for a different venue, they will be uploaded to YouTube. So once you go to the Churches United in Christ website, which is churchesunitedinchrist.org, you'll see at the top where it says the 2018 webinar series. And once they're uploaded, it'll take you straight to the YouTube channel where you'll find the videos and even the other videos from actually last year as well, if you want to go back and watch those as well. So again, thank you all for joining us, and I do hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.